12 people now face charges in the case of Emma Ray Gervasi, the Long Island teenager who was missing for nearly 1 month starting late last year. Investigators now believe Emma Ray was involved in a sex trafficking scheme for weeks before her own father tracked her down and rescued her. Emma Ray was being held against her will on a yacht, and the owner allegedly had plans to take her across state lines and continue on with the sex trafficking. It's now been more than a month since Emma Ray's rescue, but the developments in her case just keep on coming. The arrests now total 12 people charged in her disappearance. Emma Ray's case begins on December 9th in East Patchogue, New York, on the south shore of Long Island. Emma Ray was last seen at her house there, standing barefoot in her driveway. Now, according to the New York Post, it was 35-year-old Alton Harrell who allegedly picked her up from this house and drove her to a different abandoned house about 3 miles away in Bellport. For all of this, Harrell has since been charged with first-degree kidnapping and now faces life in prison. But for almost a month, we had no idea who Emma Ray was last seen with. At the time, there were some rumors that Emma Ray was a teenage runaway, but her father, Frank Gervasi, straightened all that out.
So can we just leave the stupid comments off the page that, my daughter's a runaway and things like that? She may have left the house with a stupid thought. What happened to her in this really bad world we live in is what we're talking about here. Trafficking is a huge problem across the world. It's a very big problem on Long Island, and I stress that parents should keep an eye on their children. Keep an eye on your little girls, even your boys, okay? Because these people are predators, and they will stop at nothing to get to your kids.
Emma Ray's dad, Frank, plays a huge part in this case. Before she was rescued, he was very outspoken about her disappearance and even posted update videos almost daily to his social media. In that clip we just played, Frank made it clear that Emma Ray was not a teenage runaway. He says she may have gotten into the car willingly, but that she was coerced or groomed to getting in. We've since learned that before her disappearance, Emma Ray had been chatting online with someone who convinced her to meet up. Also, before her disappearance, Emma Ray had a history with drug use. According to her dad, she even had a GPS ankle bracelet on at the time she went missing. That same bracelet was found just a block from her home, meaning that whoever took Emma Ray cut it off to avoid being traced. Now, the next time Emma Ray was seen was the following day on December 10th. She was caught on security camera video in Bohemia, New York, knocking on motel room doors and wandering around aimlessly. Prosecutors now say it was 20-year-old Kevin McDonald who took Emma Ray from that abandoned home in Bellport to the motel. McDonald is now accused of raping Emma Ray that day before leaving her at the motel. 2 other defendants, 63-year-old Daniel Burke and 61-year-old Robert Eccleston, allegedly raped Emma Ray in the same time frame too. According to the New York Post, Burke allegedly kept Emma Ray locked up in his mobile home for more than 24 hours. Eccleston allegedly also raped Emma Ray and kept her locked up in what they called a detached garage container for up to 3 days. After that, Emma Ray was apparently brought to a marina in Islip where she was forced onto a yacht. The yacht belonged to 64-year-old Francis Buckheit, the same man who had allegedly planned to sail away with Emma Ray, taking her to the Carolinas in an effort to keep up with this apparent sex trafficking operation. Thankfully, that didn't happen, and Emma Ray's dad found and rescued her on January 3rd.
Today is day 27, and I proudly am very happy to tell you guys that Emma Ray was found yesterday.
Here's Frank Gervasi once again to explain what led to Emma Ray's rescue.
It was those social media videos and the flyers that helped me to get an anonymous tip yesterday. And I want to thank that person on this video, I'm not going to mention her name, for coming forward and giving me an information about my daughter. And the phone call that I received was that she was on a boat in Islip. I didn't want to believe at the time. I did follow that up on my own. I drove down there. The lady who gave me the tip was afraid to go in the boat, believed to be with some dangerous people, etc. I still wasn't sure if it was a legit lead or not. I did bust into the boat and recover my daughter. I did clear the boat. There was nobody else on the boat at the time when I got there. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know who was inside at the time as the curtains were drawn on the boat. That being said, she's safe and alive. And I believe it was persistency that helped bring her home.
For a while, Frank kept the identity of the tipster anonymous, but according to the New York Post, he's since revealed her identity. The apparent tipster was 52-year-old Jacqueline Comiskey, who has since been charged with sex trafficking and endangering the welfare of a child. Prosecutors say she took Emma Ray to a man's house in exchange for crack cocaine. That man was allegedly 47-year-old Boonis Knight, who's charged with second-degree rape and endangering the welfare of a child. He was also charged with 3 counts of criminal sale of a controlled substance, which we now know was cocaine. Prosecutors say this incident happened on January 2nd, just one day before Emma Ray was rescued. There are 2 more female defendants in this case too. First, there's 30-year-old Elizabeth Hunter, who's charged with sex trafficking and endangering the welfare of a child, but also faces a charge of promoting an obscene sex performance by a child under 17. 48-year-old Rebecca Bromwell is also charged in the case for apparently selling drugs to an undercover police officer. She shares the same address as Ralph Knowles, who's also charged in the case. His charges are rape, sexual abuse, forcible touching, and endangering the welfare of a child in Emma Ray's case. Now, if you're keeping count, that's only 10 defendants so far. There are 2 more. On February 7th, 36-year-old Daniel Soto was arrested and charged with second-degree rape and endangering the welfare of a child for allegedly raping Emma Ray on the yacht between December 13th and 20th. The next crime against Emma Ray happened after her rescue.
The only important thing that should matter right now is my daughter's recovery and her safety. So we are definitely keeping a close eye on that and working well with getting her the care that she needs.
In his update videos, Frank Gervasi says Emma Ray is safe and being treated at a medical facility.
She is home. She is in a facility right now getting the help she needs and is safe.
So that same medical facility is allegedly where Emma Ray was assaulted once again. 42-year-old Deshawn McLean, a worker at the state mental health facility, allegedly groped Emma Ray. According to Newsday, police got a statement from Emma Ray about all of this, and they also have surveillance video from the facility. Now, this really is just one twist after another in the case of Emma Ray Gervasi, and we've got a lot to break down, so we're going to bring in criminal defense attorney and former sex crimes prosecutor Kathleen Bogenschutz. Kathleen, thank you for coming on, and I want to start with the newest development in this case, the fact that we're now up to 12 arrests, double digits the number of people that are allegedly involved in this sex trafficking scheme. What do you make of that number?
Well, it's certainly on the high end of cases that I've seen in the past, but the number of people it's not unusual. It's not unusual to see a number of people involved, but into double digits in this case, it is a little bit more on the unusual side, and it sounds like they're not finished yet.
And you know, there are a lot of details we're not quite privy to at this time. I'm sure investigators and prosecutors are keeping some things closer so that they could be revealed at trial or at upcoming court proceedings. So we're still kind of unclear. But if you had to guess how all of this happened, is there one like mastermind person that's behind all of this? Or are they all working together? How do they meet each other? How does any of it work?
The crime is not unusual, but every case is very different as to how they meet the victim and how the crimes are eventually perpetrated, whether there's some plan there for maybe to for prostitution and the child is underage, or if and they thought she was an adult. I mean, she does look a bit older than her years. That does not exonerate by any means anybody that's involved, but it leads me to believe that it's highly possible this is not their first rodeo here, trying to take someone like that.
Which is really so scary to think about. You mentioned it too. She might look of age, but Emma Ray's only 14 years old. I mean, she's not even old enough to drive yet. She's probably a freshman in high school, maybe even in middle school. She's so young. And how all of this started, I believe, is likely a grooming situation. She was speaking to somebody online. Is this something that we see that predators will kind of sneak into someone's life through the internet?
Yeah, I mean, it would be the easiest way to get into a household and to contact a child. when you think about the fact that kids are at school, there's after school activities, where are they going to meet somebody that might be interested in this? And you can protect your kids, you can lock them down in the house, but at some point in time, the world that we live in, they're gonna have to access the internet. And there are all kinds of programs that you can use as a parent. The thing that I'm going to tell my daughter when she's old enough is that basically if anybody tells you to keep a secret from me, that's your first hint that you need to tell me. So, and I mean, it would not surprise me if there are other victims out there.
The one good thing in all of that is if they were communicating via online, a messenger or an app or something, at least hopefully investigators can go through and trace where all of this came from or look through their conversations and see what it might have looked like. And I'm interested in the grooming aspect of all of this because it's something I see in a pattern throughout a lot of my cases when there are child victims or survivors in this case, where the predators kind of prey on their downfall or things that they're insecure about. Is that something that you often see, that they prey upon people who may just be down on their luck or have their guards down?
Yeah, and it's grooming is more about to use another analogy, it's about moving the goalposts. So you go a little too far, you say something a little risque, and if the kid goes and gets their parents, it stops right there, right? But if the kid doesn't do anything or thinks it's funny or continues to participate, then you can move the goalposts a little bit further and go a little bit further next time and see if they're going to tell anybody. So it's in this way that you can kind of, and I don't mean you, obviously, but somebody, if you have the inclination to victimize a child like this, that this is how you would identify which kid would keep their mouth shut and allow you to continue moving forward like this, who might sneak out of their house in the middle of the night and get in a car with you. So, yes, there's a lot of unusual things going on in this young girl's life that I'm sure a lot of your viewers would want to judge her and her parents for, but it is an explanation, not an excuse. It's an explanation as to why she was targeted. And it's not an excuse as to what happened to her. So try to keep that in mind because I've read some of the comments under some of the prior coverage in this story, and I'm sure that there is quite a bit more background to this family, but it doesn't matter. She's still a victim. She didn't ask for this. She was not of age.
Right. Regardless of anything, there is no way that she would be able to give consent to have sex with anyone as she is 14 years old. So you're right. She is a victim, a survivor in this case. And if we're talking about her background too, there has been a history with drug use. And actually, at the time Emma Ray disappeared, she had a GPS ankle bracelet monitor around her ankle. It was eventually cut off. So we kind of saw all of that. I'm wondering if drugs could have played a role in this. We've seen some of the defendants have drug charges too. Is it possible in that way they may have lured Emma Ray with drugs or counter drugged her so she may not remember everything?
I mean, and it is not mutually exclusive to consider that it's both. It could have been both. It could be they lured her with drugs and they also controlled her with drugs. So the fact that she got into the car of her own free will, obviously there's something to that. And it's possible she thought she was just going out to have a good time. And a lot of these kids that are preyed upon, I mean, their defenses are incredibly low. And I will also put this out to your audience. Somebody who is victimized once, far more likely to be victimized a second time because it's horrible to think about, but somebody who is already pretty broken down psychologically, who's maybe looking for attention in the wrong places. I mean, it's just very easy to fall back into a similar pattern, and it does not make them any less of a victim.
The re-victimization is something we do see throughout this case, just given the number of defendants they have. And we'll get back to the part about her being rescued on the boat because that is wild and huge. But based on the fact that you brought up this re-victimization, since Emma Ray has been found, she's been treated in this mental health facility. And now one of the defendants is a person who apparently worked there and sexually assaulted her. Emma Ray has come forward and talked about it. It apparently was caught on surveillance camera video. So does that go to what you were saying about the re-victimization, that this person, a predator, would see someone's already dealing with hardship and then again prey on them once more?
Yeah, or they might consider that this person could be maybe not particularly credible in reporting them, or it is, and I'm throwing this out there. It's entirely possible that it that Emma Ray believed that this was, the way that you interact with males based on the way that she had been treated over the course of the past month. And there's almost like a Stockholm syndrome that I have seen in the past with some sex trafficking victims. So if you're the orderly or you're somebody that works at a treatment center like that, it is incumbent upon you to draw a line if somebody, especially in this kind of a vulnerable state, and it boggles my mind that that this occurred. Although, like I said, shocking, not surprising, I guess.
It's just sad to see the number of defendants raised. And initially, I saw, okay, 12 defendants. I assumed it was something that happened prior to her rescue. And then to find out it was someone who was supposed to be helping her just adds another layer. But you talked about Emma Ray in all of this. She is the main witness. She was, held captive, I guess, for nearly 1 month throughout all of this. And I know investigators are going to want to talk to her because she is their number one person. She's the one who went through all of it. But how does that conversation work? Because she could be re victimized. She could have to relive some of this trauma that could be hard to do. Again, we talked about potentially she may have been on drugs or drugged in some way. Does that make things even more complicated?
It does, as to her recollection of events, certainly. A lot of human trafficking victims that I have interviewed in the past have very blurry recollections and oftentimes a very complicated timeline to deal with. What I would recommend, if somebody were asking my opinion, would be that they do an initial interview just to try to nail some of the main facts down, and then they can revisit the interview uh, weeks or months down the line. And it's entirely possible that that's exactly what happened because we had this initial spate of arrests, and now we're seeing some more. So I would imagine that that's the follow-up interviews are what we're seeing here. And also allowing her to do an interview and then maybe go talk to a therapist for a significant period of time and have some intensive therapy uh, in between interviews with law enforcement. So and just to try to, I guess, you're never going to get us, but to try to allow her to recover from remembering these things and to try to start the therapy process as soon as possible.
That is really important for her mental health, her future, because she has a long life ahead of her. And there's a lot of work ahead, I guess, so to speak. Something I want to talk about in this case, too, though, is the fact that her father is the one who rescued her on this yacht. He got a tip, broke in, found Emma Ray. Now we have her. She is now in treatment. We have tabs on her. However, this tip for a while was considered anonymous. We didn't know, who the person who had handed it over to the father was, but we're now learning that it was actually one of the defendants, one of the women. She's a grandmother. She was charged in bringing Emma Ray to the home of another man who allegedly raped her in exchange for crack cocaine. That was a bombshell to me, the fact that one of the defendants basically led the way to Emma Ray. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't know because I'm not in her brain, but I would imagine that there may have been an attack of conscience there. Or maybe, the thought of obtaining drugs was, I guess, too much of a siren call. But after she saw what was occurring, that there was some kind of a come to Jesus there. So I mean, look, I would imagine that that person, the person that brought the information to her father, who was eventually able to recover her, that that person will be treated in a much different manner than the other co-defendants. I'm not saying that she's not going to be punished, because obviously what she did was horrific, by uh, you know, stopping this at some point, even saving her any additional amount of abuse. I think that's going to be rewarded by the state, and it would not shock me if that person doesn't end up testifying.
That's something definitely to keep an eye out for. And as we talked about in the beginning of this interview, 12 arrests so far, but it could just be the start. We'll have to keep following it and see where the case goes. Kathleen Bogenschutz, thank you for coming on and recapping the case with us.
Thanks for having me. Sorry under these circumstances, though.
Before we sign off, we have to note that all of the defendants charged in this case have pleaded not guilty. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.